Now from New York is correspondent Jessica Le Masurier. Jessica, the sun is out again today and people must be getting a clearer idea of the damage inflicted. Tell us more about those cleanup operations now underway.
Well, if you go to the areas of New York that were worst affected by the flooding, you'll hear a distinctive noise, the noise of generators that are helping those water pumps to function and remove water from people's homes. I saw basements in Westchester County that were flooded entirely up to the ceiling, and people who had had to remove all of their possessions from their homes. They are now trashed. There are piles of rubbish on the streets outside the homes and businesses worst affected in New York. That is the case in a lot of areas in Queens, also in Brooklyn and in Mamaroneck, which is in Westchester County, one of the worst hit areas that I visited. Really, the damage is extensive. It'll also be time to assess the damage to the subways, because now, as climate change makes these sorts of storms and flooding situations more frequent, New York City's subways are really becoming the default sewers. Once the sewers overflow, the water goes into the subways, and that's why we saw waterfalls coming down the steps of some subway stations in New York City, and people indeed being stuck. So the cleanup efforts are underway. Many people are homeless at the moment because their apartments, their homes were entirely flooded. Some people nearby to where I am are staying in the local high school, a temporary refuge. There are also still a lot of cars abandoned on the streets in areas that flooded. Just down the road from me, the water came rushing and a woman was caught short driving in her Subaru. She had to swim out of her car to my neighbour's house, and she stayed overnight there. That house already flooded. They had to stay upstairs. The fire alarm went off all night. They couldn't stop it because it was underneath the water. They didn't get a wink of sleep, and they had a total stranger staying on their sofa. Stories like this are, of course, very common because the flooding was much more severe than expected here in New York.
Now, later today, President Biden will be visiting those areas in Louisiana damaged by Hurricane Ida. But this visit comes as anger is growing in your part of the world about the lack of emergency warnings from officials.
Yes, people are waiting to see what the federal response is going to be. Biden's, of course, playing his consoler-in-chief role, again, heading to Louisiana, which was very badly affected, and people there are still without power. It seems like they could be without power for weeks, and the temperatures there are sweltering. But the loss of life and the damage here in New York was arguably worse. Certainly the loss of life was worse, and people are very angry. People are angry that they didn't get more warning. People are angry that the subway systems, the infrastructure in this country has not been well enough maintained to face this sort of problem caused by climate change. They say something has to be done to bolster New York City's infrastructure, that money needs to be put into this, and that also more needs to be done to tackle climate change, because people, they might be able to clean up the damage this time, but when will this happen again, and how will New York City fare next time? A lot of the people who I spoke to who were affected by the storm say that they really didn't feel that they'd had enough warning, and that's why they got caught in situations that could have led to them losing their lives. One couple that I spoke to had to swim from the train station to their home. They could have been swept away in the floods. Other people almost got trapped in their basement apartments. A lot of questions being asked in New York about basement apartments, because those are the areas where people were killed. They were caught there due to this sudden flash flooding. Those working class people who have no other options. So a lot of questions are being asked about what New York City and indeed the rest of the country is going to do to improve infrastructure and prepare for the next climate change disaster here.
Jessica Le Masurier reporting there from New York.